Welcome back to the Deep Dive.
Okay.
Today is Thursday, February 19th, 2026.
It is.
And I want you to look at your calendar, take a red marker, and circle that date. Because we are officially in the endgame now.
A final countdown.
Literally. We are just over a week away.
9 days.
9 days, to be exact, away from the premiere of Famous Singers Need a Hit Song on Netflix. That drops on February 28th.
Right.
So the theoretical part of our job, the part where we stare at spreadsheets and, guess what might happen, that is almost over.
Which is honestly a relief. We have been in this analysis paralysis phase for weeks now.
Oh, for sure.
But on the 28th, the rubber meets the road. We stop guessing and we start watching.
Exactly. But before we get to the main event today, let's just quickly orient anyone who is jumping on the bandwagon a little late.
Good idea.
We've spent the last few sessions really trying to reverse engineer what makes a star in, this specific moment in music history.
Right. So if you missed the last two deep dives, we started with What's Next with Gwyn Dorado, where we looked at her whole trajectory coming off Sing Again 4.
And then we did the heavy lifting with the win score formula.
The math class episode.
The math class episode, yeah. We broke down that algorithm, the one that predicts the probability of a song becoming a hit.
We looked at variables like vocal texture, producer compatibility, and market timing, all that stuff.
And today, we're taking those numbers and applying them to a real person.
Mm-hmm.
We are looking at one of the most fascinating producer matchups on the slate. We're calling this the Ahn Shin-ae architecture.
Ahn Shin-ae.
Ahn Shin-ae. We're going to be diving deep into her world. But, before we do that, I was scrolling through the comments from the learner community this morning.
Right, yeah.
And I think we need to address something. There's a little bit of a Mandela effect going on regarding Gwyn Dorado.
I saw that too, yeah. A lot of people are remembering her as the winner of Sing Again 4.
Right. I think because she went so viral, people just assumed she took home the whole trophy.
We need to be precise here. Accuracy is kind of the name of the game for us.
It is.
Gwyn was the first runner-up. She did not win first place. And I actually think that's a crucial part of her story.
How so?
Well, just think about the psychology of it. The winner gets the glory, sure, but the runner-up gets the hunger. The runner-up has something to prove. If you win, the narrative is, can they stay on top? If you lose by a hair, the narrative is redemption.
That is a much better story for Netflix, isn't it?
So much better. And speaking of her history, we should remember her story didn't start in Korea.
No, we have to fly back to the Philippines for a second. Before she was getting these huge scores in Seoul, she had massive viral hits back home.
Tulala and Why Do We Love?
Yes.
Why Do We Love is the one I keep going back to.
Why that one in particular?
Because it wasn't a cover. It was original. It showed she had that, songwriting DNA before she ever even stepped on a Korean stage.
That's a great point.
But when she did get to Sing Again 4, the data started to get really, really interesting. And I want to bring up the scoreboard again because it sets up our producer discussion perfectly.
Okay, lay the numbers on us.
So she had a score of 798 associated with Kim Do-hoon. Now, 798 is a monster score.
Oh, absolutely.
That is career-defining territory.
But then came the finale.
She performs Light Up, which was produced by Groovy Room, and the score was 799.
1 point.
One single point. 7 judges gave her a perfect 100. 1 judge gave her a 99.
That has to be infuriating.
It's statistically absurd, but it tells us something. It tells us she can handle modern, beat-driven hip-hop production.
Which is Groovy Room's whole deal.
Exactly. But here's the question they're asking today. That 799 was with a modern sound. What happens if you take that same vocal engine and put it in a completely different vehicle?
What happens if you pair it with a retro architect?
And that brings us to Ahn Shin-ae.
Now, I have to be honest with you. When I saw this name pop up on the list of potential producers, I knew she was respected, but I didn't know a ton about her background.
Right.
I see retro and I think, what? Oldies.
See, this is where it gets fascinating. To understand Ahn Shin-ae, you have to understand she isn't just a producer sitting behind a MacBook. She is a performer.
Oh, okay.
She started as the leader of a vocal trio called the Barberettes.
The Barberettes? I mean, that sounds like a 1950s act.
That is exactly what it was. We're talking about a group dedicated to the time travel sound.
Wow.
Doo-wop. 1950s and 60s girl groups, Think the Ronettes, the Supremes.
I mean, really? In the middle of the K-pop boom, she was doing doo-wop.
Fully committed. They wore the vintage dresses. They stood around a single microphone. But musically, this is incredibly difficult stuff.
Okay, explain that to me like I'm 5. Why is that harder than what a standard K-pop group does?
Okay, so in modern pop, you often have everyone singing the same melody, right?
Right, or you have backing tracks doing the heavy lifting.
Exactly. In 3-part harmony, you are the instrument. You have to tune your voice to the person next to you in real time. If one person is even slightly flat, the whole chord just collapses.
So it requires an ear that's basically perfect.
Absolute perfection. So she's not just making beats. She understands the mechanics of the human voice inside and out. She spent years mastering that barbershop sound.
So she knows how to stack vocals to create texture, not just volume.
Precisely. And then she kind of vanished.
She did.
She did the indie thing for a decade, burned out, which is a very real thing in this industry, and moved to Jeju Island. Just completely unplugged.
The classic artist in exile moment.
Exactly. But when she came back, she didn't come back as just a singer. She signed with P Nation.
Okay, now P Nation, I know. That's Psy's agency. Gangnam Style. Sabaona, that seems like a weird fit, doesn't it?
It does.
Psy is all about high energy, crazy performance.
Yeah.
And she's retro doo-wop.
It seems weird on paper, but it was actually a genius move. It marked her evolution from retro singer to hitmaker producer. She returned with this focus on making music that feels timeless. And because she's under P Nation, she had access to some of the best voices in the industry.
So she starts producing for other people.
And this is where the Ahn Shin-ae architecture really comes in. She isn't building generic pop songs. She's building custom homes for these voices. Just look at what she did for Lee. Hi.
The song Holo. I have heard this one. It's a ballad, right?
It is, but listen really closely to the production next time. It topped the charts, but it's incredibly sparse. We call it breathing room.
Breathing room. What does that mean structurally?
Okay, imagine a lot of modern pop songs. They're just a wall of sound.
Right. Synthesizers, drums, effects, layers on layers. No silence.
None. Ahn Shin-ae does the opposite. In Holo, she uses clean chords.
Clean chords.
Think of a piano in a small jazz club. You can almost hear the hammers hitting the strings. It's not a digital processed sound. It's warm. It's a little imperfect.
Okay.
And she leaves gaps in the music. She actually lets the silence sit there for a beat.
Why? Why do that?
Because she knows Lee-hi has this husky, soulful voice. If you cover it up with a bunch of noise, you lose the texture. She built a song that forced the listener to lean in.
That makes sense. It's
Wow.
confident. It's like saying the voice is enough.
The voice is enough, exactly. And then she did Only for Lee-hi, which is this warm, romantic track. Again, very classic.
Right.
But then, and this is the curveball, she works with Hwasa.
Okay, Hwas is a totally different vibe. She's bold. She's provocative.
Completely. So Ahn writes, I love my body.
Which is a funky confidence anthem.
It's got attitude. It's got a strut to it. But then she turns around and writes Goodbye for Hwasa, which is this devastating, heartbroken ballad.
So she has the range. She can do the I Am the Queen song and the I'm Crying in My Bedroom song.
She has the range because she isn't forcing a sound onto the artist. She's analyzing the artist's persona and amplifying it. She's done it for Taeyeon and Sejong too.
It's like she's an architect designing a building specifically for the person who's going to live in it.
That's the perfect analogy.
Which brings us back to Gwyn Dorado.
Right.
Because Gwyn has a very specific house she needs to live in. We know she has the power. We saw the 799 score.
Yeah.
But I want to push back on this a little bit.
Go for it.
Gwyn is 22 years old. Ahn Shin-ae is writing songs about deep burnout, midlife reflection, maturity. Is a 22-year-old Gen Z listener really going to connect with that? Or is it going to sound like music for my parents?
That is the million-dollar question. And the answer, we have to introduce a concept that is very specific to Gwyn's background. It's the concept of Hugot.
Hugot.
No.
Hugot. I have seen this word in the comments.
Yes, it's a Filipino term. Literally, it means to pull out or to draw from.
Okay.
But in art and music, it refers to pulling these deep, painful, or poignant emotions from your gut and just putting them into the work.
So it's not just sad. It's visceral.
It's the gut punch. It's the idea that you're healing through the expression of pain. And to answer your question about Gen Z, look at the data. This generation is incredibly open about mental health, about loneliness, about anxiety.
It's true.
They aren't looking for polished perfection. They're looking for Hugot.
So you're saying Ahn Shin-ae's old soul approach actually aligns perfectly with the Gen Z mood.
100%. Look at Holo again. The lyrics are about loneliness, about looking in the mirror and comforting yourself. That is a universal feeling. If Ahn Shin-ae writes a song like that for Gwyn, it allows Gwyn to transition.
From what to what?
From being a powerhouse vocalist, the girl who just hits high notes, to a storyteller.
And that distinction is everything.
It is. A singer hits notes. A storyteller holds the room. The Win score model gave the Ahn Shin-ae pairing a probability of 0.94.
Wow.
That is a massive number.
Okay, let's dig into that number, 0.94. Why does the algorithm love this pairing so much? Is it just because they're both talented?
No, the algorithm looks for high contrast pairings that work. It sees Ahn's production variables, warm bass, clean piano, restrained percussion.
Okay.
And it matches them against Gwyn's vocal variables, high emotional weight, texture, dynamics.
So the math is saying this production leaves room for this voice.
Exactly. If you put Gwyn on a busy, noisy EDM track, her emotional weight score actually drops because the listener can't hear the nuance. Ahn Shin-ae's production maximizes Gwyn's stats.
I love that. The math backs up the art. But there's one more variable we need to talk about, and honestly, this one threw me for a loop when I was reading the show notes.
Oh.
You flagged a collaboration Ahn Shin-ae did recently with someone called Sodo Siodo.
Yes, this is a crucial preparation note.
I have to admit, I had to look this up. Siodo Band. They do. Joseon Pop.
It sounds wild, doesn't it?
It sounds like a contradiction. What on earth is Joseon Pop?
Okay, so imagine traditional Korean music. We're talking about pansori storytelling through song and like shamanistic rhythms, the kind of stuff that is centuries old.
Okay, so very, very traditional.
Now imagine taking those morning chants and those specific wailing vocal techniques and putting them over a modern funk bass line or a synth pop track.
That sounds risky.
Incredibly risky. It should not work. It should sound like a total mess. But Siodo, the vocalist, is this very unique artistic performer. He uses these traditional techniques in a modern context.
And Ahn Shin-ae worked with him.
And it worked brilliantly. And this is why it matters for Gwyn.
Ow.
Siodo is not a standard K-pop idol. He's an artistic vocalist with a weird, unique texture. The fact that Ahn Shin-ae could navigate that she could build a structure around something so specific and traditional, proves she can handle diversity.
Because Gwyn isn't a standard idol either.
No, she's Filipino. She has that R&B influence. She has the Hugot style. She has a complex instrument.
Right, yeah.
If she went to a factory producer, they might try to auto-tune her into sounding like everyone else. They might try to flatten her accent or her tone.
But the Siodo collaboration suggests Ahn Shin-ae would lean into the weirdness.
She would celebrate it. She would build the entire arrangement around the quirks. That's the bespoke approach versus the off-the-rack approach.
I like that analogy.
Yeah.
Off-the-rack pop music versus a bespoke suit.
Exactly. And for a show like this, bespoke wins.
But I want to play devil's advocate one more time here.
Yeah.
We're talking about a global Netflix show. We want Gwyn to be a world star. On Shin-ae's biggest hits, Holo. Only they are massive in Korea. But are they global hits?
That's the fear, right, that it becomes too local.
Yeah. I mean, if she writes a ballad with deep Korean lyrics, deeply rooted in Korean sentiment, does that limit Gwyn's reach? Does it stop her from breaking into the US or Europe?
I would argue the exact opposite, and this is the final provocation for today.
Okay.
I think we are past the era where you need a generic English language pop song to go global.
You think local is the new global?
Look at the trends. Look at how K-ballads are traveling. Look at Latin pop. Authenticity travels. People can feel the emotion even if they don't speak the language.
That's true. You don't need to speak Korean to feel the sadness in Holo.
Exactly. And remember, Gwyn has a Korean fluency score of 0.92 according to our metrics. She can deliver those lyrics convincingly. If Ahn Shin-ae writes a deeply personal Korean language ballad for Gwyn, it anchors her in the domestic market first. It gives her domestic traction.
And then the internet does the rest.
Right. If she tries to be the next American pop star, she's competing with every American pop star. But if she becomes the definitive A-pop vocalist, an Asian talent succeeding in Korea on local terms, that is unique, that is viral.
Art pop. I like that. So instead of watering herself down to appeal to everyone, she doubles down on the emotion and the culture.
That is the strategy. Ahn Shin-ae is the bridge. She connects the old school, the retro, the traditional with the modern. She is the perfect partner for someone who wants to be an artist, not just a celebrity.
So what does this mean for the learner listening right now? When they tune in on February 28th, what should they be looking for?
Don't just listen for the catchiest hook. Don't just look for the flashy choreography. Watch the chemistry in the studio. If you see Gwyn walk into a room with Ahn Shin-ae, pay attention.
Watch for the silence.
Watch for the silence. If you hear a track where the drums drop out and it's just Gwyn's voice floating over a clean piano, that is the Ahn Shin-ae touch. That is the architecture we're talking about.
Well, the theory phase is almost over. We have done the math. We have profiled the producers. Now we just have to wait 9 days to see if we're right.
My spreadsheet is ready.
I've got my popcorn ready. We will be back after the premiere to break down what actually happened versus what we predicted.
Can't wait.
Until then, keep listening and keep diving deep.
See you then.